Welcome to Smart Cherry's Thoughts. This is Sai from India.
Hi,
Hi, how are
Jakob.
you?
I'm great. How are you?
Yeah, I'm good too. So
Uh,
it's nice to be on your YouTube show, or your podcast.
it's an honor
Thank
for
you.
me. It's an honor for me. Thank you very much for accepting my invitation and accepting to be on my show.
Oh, no, you're welcome. You're welcome. This is anyway something that I want to do a little bit more, but it's hard to find the time, right? We have also um, spent some time trying to find the right time to do this. But no, it's fine. I'm happy to do it.
So I have gone through your profile. I can see you are a solutions architect. Also, you are co-founder of your own company and you're founder of another company. So I thought to tell about the work that you are doing to my audience and also the work that you have done to my audience.
Yeah. So you want me to talk about that?
Yeah, can you please introduce
Yeah,
yourself?
yes. Yeah, sure. Yeah, I've worked with as a software developer since 1998, and most of the time I started in 1999. I started working with Java, so that is what I have been working the most with. And around 2006, I started writing a lot about Java. People that know me from, they know me from some of these tutorials that I have written. And I started because at the time I found it hard to find good basic material about Java. So I thought, okay, maybe I can start writing some of it and see what happens, right? And then so I did that from 2006 and forward. And in 2016, around that time, I started doing more architecture. Not immediately, but little by little, I started doing more and more software architecture and also sometimes performance optimizations and stuff like that. So a little bit more special types of tasks. And then, last year I was, because of all the and I continue to do writing as well. And I have started making some YouTube videos as well, as you might have seen. And last year there I was nominated as a Java champion for all of that work. So that was a very big honor for me. I think it's always cool to have your work recognized by your peers. So that was fantastic. Yeah, so that's about it. I think I still continue to write, and I am still following what is going on in Java, but I am also now using other languages in my work. I use Python and JavaScript, and sometimes a little bit of TypeScript. And I'm probably also going to look a little bit into some of the newer languages, such as Rust, Go maybe, but we will see. Probably also the older languages such as C and D. Some of these low-level languages. I like them very much because that's where I started originally. I started with assembly programming and C programming, so I like that as well. But in today's world, we probably more often need cross-platform languages than we need high-performance languages, right?
I can also see you have two companies.
That is true. I have mostly one. I used to do a lot of freelancing as work as a freelance software developer. And so that is what one of my companies is doing. And then I have another company, which is mostly doing a little bit of entertainment stuff with someone from my family. So it's nothing big. It's just small, and we have fun with it. And it will probably never be any big business, but it's fun sometimes to have these more creative stages or areas where you can play a little bit around and be a little bit goofy without anyone noticing or anyone getting angry that you have released something which is not fully up to the latest standards or whatever, right? So that's nice. At the moment, though, I am working full-time as a full-time employee in KeyCore, which is a Danish consulting company focused on AWS solutions and architecture. So my other companies are mostly something I do in my spare time. So at the moment they are a little bit more like hobbies, but I still keep them alive because it's good for the learning and it's good for the creative, expressiveness as well.
You're from?
I am from Denmark. Yeah.
So
From Denmark.
you are an solutions architect, AWS Solutions Architect. So how much experience you have as an architect?
With AWS, I started working with it more intensively 2 years ago. So with AWS, it's not yet that long, but I mean the whole AWS platform is not that old. It's so and it keeps evolving. So there's something new to learn all the time, right? That is still, it's not completely new to me anymore, but I'm still learning a lot about architecture and about different services in AWS and different ways to architect the same solutions and all that stuff. Yeah.
And what kind of projects you do as an architect?
Oh, it depends on the customer because we're a consulting company, right? But one of the projects that I have done was a project that needed to process a lot of video and extract images from the video and do some image recognition on the videos and do a little bit of modifications to that. And I think we had around 180 terabytes of video that needed to be processed. So that was a pretty big amount of data. So stuff like that I like, but it depends on the customer, right? Sometimes it's something different. Sometimes it's smaller internal applications that need some architect or some infrastructure set up. And sometimes it's these bigger projects where you really need to think and to focus and to fine tune it, right? So it depends.
So you started as an architect 2 years back. So what kind of projects you have done in this 2 years of span?
I have, like the video project is probably the biggest one that I have done. And besides that, I have done a little bit of what do you call it? Research work into scalability in such microblogging platforms. So trying to find out which of the AWS solutions that work for that. And, so looking into AppSync and some of these features. And I think those are probably the biggest two. And I have also spent a considerable amount of that time just learning about AWS, right? So, yeah.
So how much you know about AWS?
About databases?
About AWS.
Well, I've worked about
AWS.
AWS. I'm sorry. Yeah, no. How much do I know? Well, I know a lot about the basics. I know, like the IAM, S3, Lambda, and SQS, SNS, these core services, right? And also something about RDS, the database, managed database services. And what else? What else have I touched? We are currently using the code pipeline and code commit, but somebody else on the project set that up, so I'm not an expert in those. And what else have I used on AWS? Probably a couple of other smaller things that, like parameter store and secrets manager, and these are also kind of core services that one needs to understand in order to work well with AWS. But AWS is growing, so there's always something new coming out, right? Just when you think, oh, now I know most of this, then they come out with a new service and you need to learn that too. Or a change, right? So now you can do everything in a different way and you need to learn that different way. So keeping up with AWS is hard. Yeah, that is part of our job always, right? We always have to keep up with what is going on. There's always something new coming out.
So starting your technology career in 1998, can I say you have done most of your technology work as a software developer?
Yes, that's true. That's true. Most of it has been software development. Yeah.
So
a lot of it has been various kinds of web applications, such as internal enterprise applications, and I have also done some data engineering with Kafka, where we would be extracting a lot of data from databases underneath existing applications. So we would capture all that information using data change capture, and then joining all that information into larger business objects, which were then stored on Kafka topics. And then we had to also call some external systems, etc., etc. So that was, I think, we had also at least a terabyte of data there, and probably more. So yeah, I have also been juggling big data in in Kafka as well. So yeah, such stuff. But it used to be a lot more standard application development, and lately it has become more specialized, right? So some of it is architecture, some of it is data engineering, some of it is performance optimization. And at the moment, I'm actually revisiting one of the earlier projects and doing cost optimization to try to bring the AWS costs down. So yeah, it's very easy to spend a lot of money on AWS. So now we're trying to reduce it a little bit.
So how do you define your career as your career? You have spent a lot of time in developing applications, working on web applications. Now you become an solutions architect where you need to do architecture related things. So how do you define two persons in you?
How I define them?
The two persons in you, the developer and the architect.
Yeah, actually, I think these two, or at least the way I look at it, is I find these two roles to be benefiting from each other, right? When you have to design an architecture, it is very useful to have a deep technical understanding of what is going on, because sometimes as an architect, if you might make a decision and then later on you realize that because of something at a lower level in the technology stack, the decision you made up here does not make any sense, or it doesn't really work very well, or performance is bad, or the costs are exploding, or whatever. So I think it is very useful as an architect to have had a long experience as a developer. So I don't see them as conflicting. I see them as contributing to each other. And also sometimes I still have to get my hands dirty writing some code. For instance, we write infrastructure as code, right? And sometimes we also implement some of the services. Let's say we have a couple of lambdas that needs to glue the system together. Well, we don't hand that off to a developer. We just code it ourselves, right? Just say, it's fine. I can do that. It's maybe a day's work or a few hours work. Then you just do it yourself. And being able to do that as an architect, I find to be very beneficial as well. It just makes the process a little bit faster and smoother, I think.
And when you started using cloud technology in your career, and how was before cloud technology and after cloud technology?
The first time I worked with AWS was already in 2016, and that is also when I met the one of the people from this company where I'm now working on that project. And yeah, well, how has it changed? Well, a lot of things are so much easier when you can just start up a virtual machine and shut it down again, or you can implement a Lambda and you can trigger it and just call it, and then you can say, oh, this is wrong, let's delete it, or let's just update it or change it or whatever, right? So architecture-wise, it has become a lot easier because the cost of your decisions are lower. So if you start out believing that you need 10 servers and then you realize you only need 5, well, you can just shut down the other 5, right? And you haven't ended up in a situation where you bought 5 servers and now you don't need the hardware anymore, right? So this is really this has become a lot easier, I think, and that is also making the job of an architect closer to the job of a developer, because now you can write code that creates architecture or creates infrastructure, which I think if you go back 10 years, that was a lot harder, right? You had to actually fiddle a lot more with the hardware itself if you were working either as a sysadmin or as an architect. But now these roles and these jobs are merging a little bit more, right? So it all ends up being code.
So you worked on applications which was on premises. Now you are also working on applications which are into cloud. So what is the difference that you are observing, and what is the advantages, and what is the major change that is benefiting businesses?
Oh, I think definitely one of them is the speed, meaning how fast you can go from having an idea to having something running in the cloud. Whereas often in on-prem, when you're working with an on-prem data center, sometimes it takes maybe a few weeks before they have enough hardware for you to start your project. But in the cloud, you can start immediately, right? So that is one big advantage. Another big advantage is that you can experiment a lot more and try to run a big cluster of something and see if it works for you or not. And if it doesn't work, you just shut everything down. So you get a lot more freedom to experiment. So that's another one. And also, I think when it comes to the ability to scale down again for your applications to dynamically scale down, you can also sometimes save money when you have applications with variable loads on, right? So you can scale up quickly when you need the load, and then you can scale down and save money when you don't need the compute resources anymore. So these are probably some of the biggest benefits I see: speed, the ability to experiment with different types of architectures and see what works best for you, and also the ability to scale quickly, both up and down in resources and in cost. I think those are the biggest advantages. But then I think your infrastructure as code, which means you can check it into Git and you can have somebody else review it. It's easy to repeat it. It's easy to replicate it. So I think those are definitely some of the biggest advantages. In general. And then of course it's easy to make backups and of data and all that stuff. You can quickly copy a database and try something out over here and test something, and then okay, fine, I don't need the database anymore. I delete the whole test environment and stuff like that. So you get a lot of flexibility as well with the cloud. So speed, flexibility to experiment, and the ability to scale up and down quickly.
So AWS has more than 200 plus services, and it is one of the largest and the top cloud companies in the world. So how AWS is thinking, and if you, as an architect, if you observe the services that AWS is providing, so what we can do as a human beings, how effectively and efficiently we as a developers can use for different business purposes.
Oh, well, this is of course always a challenge. Like you say, AWS has grown so big with more than 200 services now, and it keeps growing, right? So sometimes they have many different ways of doing the same thing. and it can take some time to just kind of get an overview of the many different ways you can do the same thing. I think that is probably I think one of the biggest challenges with a cloud that is evolving as quickly, as fast as AWS is, right? So in theory, AWS has services that can work for IoT, for the media, for gaming, for enterprise applications. But in practice, you can only use them if you have actually learned them. So the next challenge then is to learn all these services fast enough for you to actually be able to master them. But I think where AWS is going, you can use it for almost anything. I don't really see any type of system anymore that I think you could not do well on AWS. They have services for almost anything, and they keep adding new stuff. Sometimes the first versions of a service might not be super polished, but that is true for most software, right? The first version is never as great as version number 5 or version number 10. So I think it's becoming a very complete and very comprehensive compute platform. And one of the changes that I might see happening there is that where maybe right now, or like a year or two ago, 3 maybe, when we built something on AWS, we would use a lot of the core features, like, virtual machines, maybe some Lambdas, maybe some databases. But as the services get more and more advanced, we also start to architect at a higher level. So instead of creating virtual machines and databases and networks, we might just use a serverless service that is created and prepackaged for that specific purpose for us, right? So you don't install your own media encoder. You just use a finished media encoder that AWS has already made, and you don't install your own AI and machine learning tools. I mean, you can, but maybe you just use the ones that AWS has already made for you that are ready to use for you in a short notice, right? So that, I think, is what is changing, is that we are starting slowly to architect the solutions at a higher level, using more and more services. Services as a service. It sounds silly, but that's basically what it is, right? You're more and more high-level services.
So, with this experience, with architecting experience, also with development experience that you have, which project that you think that can squeeze maximum potential of yours in AWS?
Which project you mean, of my personal ones, or
which project that you want to do that can actually make that can be so challenging and that you would love to do?
Well, I would like to dive a bit deeper into all the edge computing stuff that is coming, because it expands the cloud from being just like a data center to be like a hybrid thing with like some central data centers, but also edge nodes, edge computing locations around the world. So those kinds of applications I would like to do more of. But we will see what happens, right? I think especially in IoT type systems, you will benefit from edge computing, because they have a lot of devices or sensors that are recording a lot of data, and you need to respond maybe to that data really quickly, and sending it all to the cloud and responding there can be too slow. So maybe you need to respond already at the edge, so closer to the source of the data, right? So those are the ones that I would like to do a little bit more. I am also privately looking into peer-to-peer networks and stuff like that, but I think that does not need the cloud as much, because the whole idea is that you run it on people's desktop computers, right? So, but you still might need a little bit of cloud compute resources in order to enable their peers to detect each other in the first place, right? To get the first 2 nodes to connect and get the next 3 peers to connect to that. But once they are connected, they don't need the cloud so much anymore. So I think that is very interesting as well. But it's that is actually how the whole crypto and blockchain world is working, right? This whole platform. So this is something completely different. They are trying to address some of the same problems as we are in the cloud. Yeah. So this is very interesting. Yeah. But that's probably not going to be too cloud centric, I think.
So in your career, I'm sure you might have worked in developing a lot of different types of web applications and different softwares. So today, with that experience, AWS Cloud is providing a lot of services. So all the applications that you worked for, if all those applications would have run in AWS, do you think that we have enough resources and have the same compatibility?
You mean if we have enough resources? Do you mean like that that AWS has enough computers, or do you mean if they have enough different services?
Compatibility. Like those applications was there. Most of those applications would be in on premises. Does it have the same compatibility in cloud?
I think today we're getting very close. I think that you can run most of what you need to run in the cloud. I think now a lot of what is keeping companies back is can be issues such as the law, right? What the law says about where you are allowed to store data, like sensitive data such as medical records or like personally identifiable information, right? There might be some laws that says that you are not allowed to store that outside of, for instance, if you are a European Union membership country, then there's some data you're not allowed to store maybe outside of the European Union. So this can be sometimes a challenge. And also you need to know that you can store it securely enough. And sometimes people don't always know if the cloud is can deliver all those guarantees that the law says you need to have. But AWS has been doing a lot in this area in order to work with the legislation, the legislative bodies in the EU in order to make sure that AWS can live up to that, at least in the European Union. And I'm pretty sure you will have the same challenges in other countries, such as in the US. I mean, the AWS is from the US, right? So they probably don't have that issue, but I'm pretty sure in other big countries like India or Brazil or Nigeria or whatever, all over the world, that this is also a little bit of challenge is that. And then you can have issues. I think China is not allowed to use AWS, but I'm not quite sure. Or maybe they have like a special Chinese region with, which is subject to a different set of laws than the rest of the, AWS cloud. And they also have Alibaba cloud in China, which is very big. So maybe AWS is not so big in China, but they would have the same issues, right? And then we have, of course, questions of national security. Like if you are storing like nationally sensitive data, such as military information or governmental information, maybe you don't want that stored too far away from your own country, right? Yeah.
So, as an architect, what is your role and responsibility?
As an architect, well, architects are typically involved in the project sometimes a little bit earlier than the developers. So when, at the time when the project is still at an idea stage, and then you start with the first ideas or with the first requirements, you start sketching out how could this system be structured, which services do we need, which storage do we need, which compute resources do we need, all of that. And then little by little you start putting together the blueprint the architecture for the system. And when as a cloud architect, you might sometimes also have to implement it yourself. Means you have to write the infrastructure as code in order to create the platform that the code has to run on top of. And once that is done, if the code is not big, then maybe you write the code yourself too, but then you hand it off often to developers there. You say, here are the resources that you need, or that your application has to run on. Now you can start developing it. And sometimes you also just, what you hand off to the developers is just the infrastructure as code, so that they can just create a new environment with the specifications that you have set up, right? So instead of giving them a finished environment, you just say, here's the recipe, go create as many as you need. I have already added the security and dimensioned the system with the memory, and I put the restrictions on it, etc., etc. But you can continue from here. So I think that is the role. I think it's looking at the project in a little bit at the bigger picture, and figuring out what other resources and other services also in your own system, in your own company or in the customer's IT landscape that this application needs to interact with. You also need to think about that. How do we get a connection from this application to the single sign-on service and used by the client? So it's a little bit different. You have to think a lot more about connectivity and scalability and these kinds of issues than you do about writing the application code itself. But having said that, the best architecture is usually co-evolved with the developers, right? Because as soon as they start coding, they will come back and say, oh, this is not working well. Can we change this? Oh, this is also not working well. Can we change that? And you're like, okay, well, let's have a look at that, right? So you need to really listen to the developers and really work closely with them. I think that normally produces the best results. It's at least in my own experience, a lot of the times when we were just, as a developer, handed a finished architecture from someone else, the result would normally not be as good as when we were able to talk to the architect and make changes, right?
So how it will be when you are planning it and when you design the architecture, when it is in planning stage, comparing that with the reality when it is in implementation stage, what challenges actually you will face?
Oh, you have several challenges. First of all, I think what you believe to be possible in theory is not always possible in practice, right? Sometimes you don't know until you start implementing it. So you might have talked to like a vendor, like let's say you have to integrate with an external SaaS solution, right? And the salesperson say, yeah, sure, we have an API. You can easily just integrate with that, and it can do everything you need. And then in reality, you realize, oh, but it's missing some parameters, or it's missing some functions that you actually need. So the things you need to do with that SaaS solution is not actually possible. And sometimes you don't know that until the developers start working on it, and they come back and say, hey, I can't do this. You told me that I can get this data here, but this is not possible. They don't have that functionality in the API. And then as an architect, you have to go back and say, okay, what can we do then differently? You have to maybe talk to the SaaS vendor. Sometimes they change sometimes they add the functionality to the API. So then you also have to facilitate that conversation, right? So that is one thing. That's one challenge, realizing that what you thought was possible is not actually possible. And I think another challenge is sometimes the way that you think the system is supposed to work, it does not end up being the way it actually works, right? Like, because as an architect, you are involved a little bit earlier in the process. You're also talking to the business people a little bit earlier. And so you design your architecture based on what the business people say at that early time in the process. But they also change their mind as they see the system evolve. Once the developers start working, right, they also start realizing, oh, can we also do this? Oh, maybe we don't need this. Maybe we would rather have this. And so so the system changes, and the architecture that you designed is maybe not the best architecture for the system as it ends up looking. So this is another challenge, that reality shifts from theory, right? And then also just sometimes you make a certain set of assumptions when you make an architecture. For instance, this cost optimization project that I'm doing at the moment, in the first architecture, we had assumed that the most expensive cost would be compute resources. But looking back at how the project the system has been running for about a year, we realized that actually the most expensive thing is storage, right? And so now we have to go back and maybe re-architect the system a little bit and say, okay, let's change the system so we don't store so many copies of the data along, in the processing pipeline. Or maybe we squeeze the pipeline a little bit together so that we store less data and that thus save more money. So this is another thing where we realized later that the assumptions we thought, were right. So the theory we thought was correct turned out not to be correct in reality. And then we have to go back and correct it. And this is very common. So this is why it's very important to have this feedback loop between the developers and the architects, but also the operations people, right? They come back and say, you know what, this system that you designed, it's crashing all the time. Why is that? Why is it crashing? And you start looking into it and you realize, oh, there's a problem over here. Let's fix that. Yeah. So you need that feedback loop, I think.
So how much time it takes? Yeah.
No, continue.
So how much time it takes for you usually to design an architecture for a project?
Oh, it depends on the size of the project, right? Sometimes, and it also depends on whether it is the first time you design an architecture for a project, or if it is for a project that looks similar to that, or if it is like the second or the third time or whatever, right? Because once you have the first time you design an architecture, it takes longer time. It can take maybe like a month or 2 or 3, depending on the size, right? Because there's a lot of things you have to check. But if you have already designed a similar system before, then you already have a good idea about what the architecture should be. So then, of course, it takes shorter time, and you might also already have some infrastructure as code that you can reuse or at least get inspired by from an earlier project. And then, of course, it takes shorter time to design it, right? But I would say it's usually a matter of a few months, but it also depends a little bit on how much research you have to do, because sometimes you have to you have many multiple different options or multiple different ways you could design the system, and you need to do a bit of research to find out, is option A better than option B or option C? And then you start realizing the pros and cons of each of these different solutions, and then you start comparing, right? So sometimes when there's a lot of research, then it can take longer. But
so is it possible for an architect to give exactly what a customer needs?
Sometimes it is. If the project is have a very, standard form. Let's say you have like a standard web application and a database. The clouds are really good at doing that. So you can either just install your web application or develop your web application and install it on a virtual machine or in a Docker container or something like that. And the same you can do with the database, and the cloud can really help you very easily with that. But then sometimes you get someone, you have a customer that comes up with something that is completely new and that no one else has really done before. And then you really have to be creative and say, okay, there are maybe no perfect building blocks for this, but there are maybe some decent building blocks for this. Okay, so we will take this data and we will probably store that in this system. Then we take this data and we probably store that in that service. And then we run these parts on a virtual machine, and then we use some lambdas for this. And then you end up with like what I usually call like a patchwork of an architecture, right? So it does not look ideal, but it typically ends up working. You get everything to work, but it's not perfect. But that is something that happens when your system has some needs which you don't have the perfect tools for. Then you always end up having to be a little bit creative and do some workarounds and do the best with what you have. So sometimes it is possible to give the customer exactly what they want, and sometimes you have to be creative to get close to it.
And as an architect, how you will decide the time and the cost?
Well, you can only really estimate based on your own beliefs and experience, right? So if a customer is asking me to design an architecture for a given system, then I will have to first look at like the requirements for the system and like the size of the system. And then I will try to break that down into to smaller and smaller pieces, just like you would with an application, right? You also try to say, okay, we have this big block of functionality. Now we break it up into smaller pieces and try to estimate those individually, and then you sum it up and add a little bit of buffer at the end, right? For like unforeseen events. There's always something in a project that you cannot predict that happens, so you need a little bit of a buffer for that. But otherwise, I think the techniques are very similar to the techniques that you use if you're estimating a software project. It's just different tasks that you're estimating. It's not coding, but I mean, it's maybe research or like configuration and also infrastructure as code time that you are trying to estimate, right?
So how a developer in you is helping you to be a good architect?
How a developer is helping me to become a good architect?
How a developer in you are a developer
in me.
Yeah.
How
a developer in you is helping you to be a good architect?
I think I mentioned that a little bit earlier. When you have a deeper technical understanding, the deeper technical understanding that you get from being a developer, you also sometimes understand what is and is not possible with services at a higher level. You know, sometimes you see you might assume, if you don't have a deeper technical knowledge, that this service can do this and it can do that. But once you have been a developer, you realize no, this is not possible. Or you know that certain data formats are more compact than others, or you know that making a lot of network calls slows down your application. So all of that stuff that you have been exposed to as a developer also helps you when you have to like look at the system in the big picture, right? Because then you know, it's not a very good idea to send like 10 gigabytes from this virtual from this server to that server, and then send the same 10 gigabytes over here and do something like that. You realize, it's probably better to maybe have the code go to where the data is instead of having the data go to where the code is when the data amounts gets big. And so there are a lot of also a lot of the techniques such as batch processing or like real-time stream processing. These techniques you learn as a developer, and they really help you think about the architecture a little bit more of what is possible to do with batch processing versus what is possible to do with stream processing and real-time processing. And so I think it's definitely the technical knowledge that is helpful there, and the experience you get as a developer is really helpful. In that way, it teaches you a lot more about what is and is not possible with the technologies that you are using in your architecture.
So in this technology experience of yours, you started in 1998. You have spent a lot of time in understanding technology and how it is benefiting and solving the human problems. And you are being the reason for a lot of organizations, uh, you know, organizations, the problems that have been solved from you. So you saw different businesses and you saw the evolution of the technology from 98 to 2023. So in this evolution, you saw business requirements as a developer, as a person who is working in different tools and in different technologies in this industry. So how you will define the change in business requirements comparing all these years? How it is changing and what businesses are or business owners are expecting or wanting?
So I think that the change has come at different levels, right? So at first there has been a change in the systems themselves, meaning in the beginning the technology was not as in 1998 web and internet technology was not as well understood as it is today, and there were not as many tools available as there are today, and platforms and services. So the ambition level of the companies was a lot smaller back then, right? They wanted to have maybe a small system to do this, and so you made a small system that could do just that, right? And then later they needed a smaller system that can do just this over here, and then you did that. And then little by little, developers started realizing, though, a lot of these applications, they are similar. So they started developing platforms that made it easier to make these applications, such as the Java Enterprise Edition, or Spring and Spring Boot, or Ruby on Rails, right? And so the application development got easier, right? So instead of us coding almost everything by hand, little by little, we were using more and more and more toolkits. So that's changing as from the developer perspective. And once application development got easier, that feeds back into the organizations and the companies becoming more ambitious. They realize, now this that used to take 3 months now take 1 month. Okay, maybe we can expand what we want in the system. And so the businesses started thinking, instead of thinking like in one system here and one system here and one system here, they started thinking like more holistically in bigger systems, like what should our entire landscape be able to do? And IT landscape, right? And so they started thinking about that and started building more and more internal systems that are connected with each other and all that stuff. So I think that is what I have seen change, is the adoption of technology has really increased a lot, so that today most companies are one way or another, they are technology driven companies, right? Even if they are not selling something that is technological, the entire core of the of most organizations is governed and organized and managed through the use of technology. So yeah, ambition levels have grown. And technology adoption has really grown. And for us developers, the platforms have really grown as well. And of course, with that, developers get smarter and smarter. And so the languages have also grown. When I started, Java was very new. And other than that, you had C and C++, right? And then maybe if you worked on a mainframe, you used some COBOL. But that was it. There were a lot of other languages, but there were not that many that were widely used. There were some using some Pascal or Borland, Delphi or something like that. But other than that, I think you had not that as many languages. Or Perl was used as well on Linux. But today we have like an explosion of programming languages, right? I think which is also partly because once we got the internet, we also as developers started communicating over the internet and say, oh, wouldn't it be nice if we had this feature or that feature? And then these language designers might say, no, this is a small thing. I don't want that. And then this other guy says, no, then I just create my own language. And then we get one new language and another new language and another new language, right? So now we have a ton of languages. It can be hard to keep up with that. So, but yeah, the changes within the businesses is mostly this higher ambition levels, higher tech adoption, and also the awareness now that you have to let the organization be technology driven quite a lot. And in this, I would like to say, this is something that I think organizations should start addressing is managers need a better technical understanding than many managers I have met have so far. And this is not to be hard on managers, because managing a company is also big, but it's the same problem. When you have an architect that is missing some technical information, then the developers are handed an architecture which is hard to implement in reality. And the same is true, when you have business people handing down a set of requirements that doesn't really fit with what is possible technically. You really have a problem implementing it. And sometimes it's a matter of making a few changes here and there, and then it would work better. So I think that is probably the challenge that the business side has to find a way to catch up with, is that the people managing the companies need, I think, or would benefit from. They don't need it because obviously all the companies out there are running quite well already today, but they would benefit from it, right? So they could do it even better than they're doing today if the managers had more technical understanding, had a deeper technical understanding. But this is something you also see in a company such as Tesla, where Elon Musk is requiring all his managers to be able to write code. It's just the way it is, right? If you can't write code, you cannot be a manager in one of Elon Musk's companies there. So you really need to have some technical understanding. And I don't know that it is necessary to be a developer or have technical knowledge to manage everything in a company. But at least I think at the first levels of management, I think it is beneficial. Maybe when you're the CEO, it's not so necessary anymore, right? Because you have managers at lower levels that take care of all of that.
Maybe because he started his career working on Zip2, writing code, and now become the entrepreneur. Maybe he thinks that is easier, like you said. It becomes easier and to solve business problems.
Yeah, and he can, when the engineers are bringing a problem to him, he understands. It's like, yeah, sure, that's a problem. Who can fix that, right? How do we fix that? Come up with some good solutions. And where sometimes if you talk to someone who doesn't understand it, they don't know if the engineer is lying or not. But you cannot lie to Elon Musk because he understands it, or he just goes to another engineer and asks him, is this true? And if it is true, explain it to me, right? Yeah. So you cannot, So that, I think that in that way, it's good for him, right? For his company.
So 25 years of experience in technology as a professional, and worked for different companies and helped in solving different problems. So how you are able to maintain this logical thinking?
Oh, how do you mean maintain it? For me, I think logical thinking was something I learned as a teenager, and I have just continued to do it, right? So it's not something that I'm thinking a lot about how to continue or to maintain. I think it's part of my nature, in a way, or maybe it wasn't part of my nature, but I have done it so much that it kind of became part of my nature, right? Yeah. Just like if you run a lot or you play a lot of football, that becomes a part of your nature too. So I think it's mostly, I think maintaining it is probably very much a question of keep doing it, keep engaging yourself in the analytical work instead of handing it off to someone else.
So
Yeah.
you're working in AWS, Amazon Web Services. You're using different services. How humans are thinking, the experts who are creating these services, how they are thinking, uh, uh, they are creating solutions, by understanding the problems that are already there, or they are thinking beyond and bringing services which will solve future problems.
I think they do both. I think that is my experience. Sometimes they, I think the first services in AWS were probably reactively designed, meaning they saw a need first and they started making services for that. But I also think that there are some of their newer services. I think some of them are sitting down and talking to each other about, if this trend is continuing in that way, what kind of services will we need in 2 or 3 years, right? And then they start already planning for that in the future. For instance, and I think maybe some of it can also be developed. I have no idea how consciously all of it is developed. Maybe some of it is a little bit by accident, but something like AWS Lambda, which kind of kicked off the whole serverless computing trend, is maybe something I think maybe they did not predict how successful this would be. And once people started realizing, oh, serverless is really useful for a lot of things that, that need to sometimes run a lot and other times not run very much. And I don't want to worry about servers or how big the servers have to be or how many servers there has to be. I just want to, upload my code and have it run whenever it's needed, and have AWS take care of the rest. Something like that, I'm not sure they really realized would be as big a success as it is today. So I think there's a lot of push. This is one of these areas where they accidentally stumble upon something which is very useful. And then once they understand that people want this, and then I think they start analyzing why is this successful, and then they start designing services into the future for that. Right now, we are also getting serverless databases. Actually, we've had that, such as Dynamo. But they are also now making more and more of the traditional SQL databases more and more serverless. So you don't have to think about how many servers you need. You just say, hey, start up a serverless cluster, and when I need more compute, add it to my cluster. And when I don't need it anymore, take it away so I don't pay for it. Right? And this whole elastic way of looking at resources, I think, it's quite fascinating. And I think maybe they knew it already. But I think it has become a much bigger success than they might have anticipated. So yeah, how were they thinking there? Sometimes they, like I said, sometimes they see a need, they make the service. Sometimes they make a service and people start realizing, oh, this is useful for this and this and this and this. Also, please give us some more of that. And sometimes they are looking into the future and seeing, there's a trend here. For instance, with edge computing, there's a trend. We probably need some services for edge computing in the future. Let's start now and start thinking about, let's look at the edge projects we are seeing today. And let's try to find out what kind of services that they could benefit from, so that we can help future edge computing projects get up and running much faster.
You design things for Azure Cloud as well?
No, at the moment, not. I have been, the project that I was working on, which was running on Kafka, was also running in Asia. But no, I'm not actively doing any Asia infrastructure, Asia architecture. I mean, many of the concepts will be the same, but a lot of the configuration will be different, right? So I might be able to draw the architecture and say, okay, I assume they are the same types of services available or similar types of services available in Asia. That I could probably do, but if I were to write the infrastructure as code, I might need to study that a little bit more in detail, right? And make sure that I understand exactly how these services work in Asia. But of course, some of the concepts will be similar.
So we have different companies for this: GCP, Alibaba, IBM.
Yeah.
We have a lot of companies. So what is the difference that you are observing in AWS and?
Oh, what are the differences? I mean, obviously, I don't know everything about all these clouds because they are really big. So maybe what I'm about to say now is maybe not representative of reality anymore. But I can give you what my impression is or what my perception is of the clouds. I think from a feature standpoint, I consider probably AWS to be the ones with the most features. I think Asia is a close second. It also has a lot of features now, and it keeps growing. I think Google Cloud, the impression I got of Google Cloud was that it was more focused, which means it did not have 10 different ways of doing the same thing. It gave you maybe like one or two, but which could be used for many different purposes, right? So instead of giving you 10 different databases to choose from, you get one, but it's a good all-round database that you're getting. And that seems to be my impression of what Google Cloud is trying to do, is less choices or less different services, but more general purpose services. So you can do more stuff with the same thing. Once you have learned this service, you can use it for A, B, C, D, and E. Whereas sometimes in AWS, you can use one service for this, and then, you need another service for that. And even if the needs are similar, it's not exactly the same service, right? So I think that is it. And then I haven't played a lot with Alibaba Cloud, to be honest. And this is where we get into the the judicial and how do you say, national security areas where it's a Chinese cloud. So we have to be a little bit more careful what we use it for. In Europe, right? And of course, whereas if you live and work in China, then it's perfect to use Alibaba Cloud because it's compliant with all the Chinese laws and regulations. So then there are some of the smaller ones also, right? There are still some small clouds like when I say smaller, they're not so small anymore, but you have DigitalOcean, you have Linode, and then and there was Heroku at some point as well. And then we have one in a European cloud. It's not so big yet, but it doesn't have so many services, but the services it has, it's called Hetzner, Hetzner. The services it has are highly has very good price performance point, right? So where AWS is probably focusing on getting you a lot of services and a lot of automation, Hetzner is more focused on what we give you will be very affordable and perform very well, but we don't have 1,000 services. Right? So there is the spectrum of clouds, and I think I like that as well. I like this idea because sometimes you have something small you want to play with, and then it can be maybe a little bit cheaper to test it out in some of the cheaper clouds. Even though it might be easier to do it on AWS, it might still be cheaper to do it. And if you have to spend something like $50 to $100 out of your own pocket, maybe it's okay to do a little bit of extra work, right?
So, what do the regular mistakes that most of the solutions architects in AWS do? What are the misconceptions that they have?
I am probably the wrong person to ask about that because I haven't met that many different AWS solution architects yet. I have only met the ones from where I work, or that I have worked with. And since I have not been working on all the projects they have been working on, I don't really know if they are making a lot of mistakes. And if they did, I don't know what those mistakes are. And who knows, maybe I'm the one who is making the mistake and they're the ones doing it right. So, but I think in general, one of the challenges that I have seen when I look at the debates online, one of the challenges I see is that there's maybe too much reliance on complying with best practices, and too little focus on designing an architecture that is actually appropriate for the system that you are working with. I think sometimes we have a tendency to just Google and see what is best practice in this area, and then we just design the architecture exactly like that. And then it turns out that these best practices, they don't match your situation, right? So it's like these three choices are good, but the last two choices are maybe not so good for this concrete system. And so I think this kind of just leaning back and relying on what is essentially someone else's thinking, I think is a challenge. I think as architects, but also as developers, we have to understand why something is best practice, but we have to be able to deviate from it whenever we find that this is not appropriate for our situation, or we take the pieces that are good and we leave out the rest, right? So as I tend to say, which is maybe a little bit controversial, but like best practices are for beginners, right? If you don't know anything, you start with leaning against what is best practices. But once you get better and better and better, you need to look less and less and less at the best practices, and you use your head yourself, right? You think yourself, because you know now what is the appropriate way of designing this particular system, rather than always using the same recipe. But best practices can be a good place to start, but it should rarely be where you end, I think. So that, I think, is a challenge. And then I think we can sometimes, it's the same problem, but in other areas, like we tend to lean too much against specific design methodologies, like same in coding. Oh, I only use functional programming, or I only use object-oriented programming, or I only use data-oriented programming. And I'm more like, no. This is like mixed martial arts. You pick and choose, right? You take this technique from this school, you take that technique from that school, you mix it together, and you find something that works very well for you and for the system that you're working on. I think that is a big challenge.
Most of your life, technology life, you have communicated with the machine as a developer. Now, as a solutions architect, you are communicating with human beings. So
that's true.
How do you define this communication with machine and computer, machine and human beings?
Well, actually, as a consultant, most of my life I've worked as a consultant, and in that role, I also have to talk to the customer all the time, and I have to talk to my colleagues, and especially in the beginning, because I don't know anything. When I join a project, I don't know anything about that project. I need to get a lot of information in. So I have always had to communicate a lot with humans as well. And I think what is the difference? I think the biggest difference is that computers have like things they can do and things they cannot do, or things you can kind of make them do, right? So if you can explain it to the computer and the computer has the functionality built into it, you can make it do it. But the computer never tells you, that's fine, that sounds good, but I don't feel like doing it. I want to do it like this, right? The computer never tells you that. So sometimes when you come with an architecture or a design suggestion and you tell it to a human and say, yeah, that's fine, but I want to do functional programming. Or no, I want to do event-driven architecture. I want to do something else. And so you have to convince people right? You have to persuade people. You don't have to persuade a computer. The computer will just explain or like do whatever you tell it to do. I think that is one of the biggest problems. And also, the computer doesn't care how you talk to it, right? So if you are getting angry at the computer, it's still doing what you tell it to in 2 minutes later. Whereas if you get angry at a colleague or someone you work with, then they might not listen so much to you for a while until you're like, okay, I'm sorry, I overreacted. And you try to be, if you criticize the system, you have to do it in a nice way and say, okay, yeah, that's looking good. And maybe this could be changed. Maybe we could do something like this over here instead of coming in. You don't walk in and say, that's shit. And then, like that. This is bad. Change this, right? You have to think about how you talk to humans a lot more than you have to than with computers. But then, of course, sometimes you can also just give a human a little bit of information and they can figure out the rest themselves. Whereas with computers, you have to explain them everything, right? Like you have to do it like this and then like that and then like this and then, right? Whereas a human, you say, can you fix this? Oh yeah, sure. And then they figure out the rest themselves. Right? Well, yeah. Emotions and intelligence, I guess, right, is the big differentiator.
So how
But
AI
maybe
is
that
going to be?
changes. Yeah, exactly. That's exactly what I was thinking. Maybe AI will completely change that, and you start writing to the computer, and it starts saying, I think you are a little bit aggressive in your language here. I'm not sure I feel like doing that. Could you please say it in a nicer way? Yeah, maybe the way it changes is that we can think less rigidly, more loosely about ideas, and then have the computer formalize your ideas, synthesize your ideas into more systematic structures. So you have to do less of that logical thinking yourself. Sometimes you can maybe just have like, it has to be something like this, and then the computer says like this. No, change that line. Like this. Yeah, that's fine, right? And maybe you don't have to like do all of that analytical work yourself. And who knows, maybe in the future, the AI is the computer, right? So that you don't have different applications. You just have one. You just have the AI. That's the only application you have. You open your computer and then you start writing, to the computer. I want to play a game. It has to be like this, or it has to have airplanes in it and something like that. And then it makes a game for you and say, it's getting boring. Can you add something to it? And then the AI adds something to your game. And like, can you make this multiplayer because I want to play this game with my friends? And then the AI will make it, a multiplayer game. So maybe that's where we end up. One application that keeps adapting to everything we want. But we will see.
So you have studied the tools, the programming languages, you worked with the different applications, and you have communicated with different people in your life, which is part of your profession. So everything is communication system. It can be communicating with computer in computer language. And if you're talking with human being, you're communicating in human understandable language. So this communication system, these networks, this collection of systems and this collection of networks, which is Amazon Web Services Cloud. We have data centers in different parts of the world which are communicating with each other and sharing information, and we can able to deploy applications anywhere and can able to access it from anywhere. And this communication system development you have seen in your life, how humans are evolving and how humans are using technology for their daily needs or solving their daily problems. So as a youngster, what do you say? What my future is going to be with the technology? Do you think that human equal to AI or AI equal to human?
This is a very, very big and open question. So how will it be? I think what we have seen, if we look back at the last 20, 25 years with the internet, I think what we have seen is a tendency to go from an internet that was focused very much on, connectivity, and we could share some information, we could communicate, to an internet that has been highly commercialized. So even software that is open source now tend to have like a commercial, like a revenue model for it, right? In order to keep financing it. And I think because it is much easier to commercialize a web application than it is to commercialize desktop applications, I think that is another way that we have seen a technological shift towards web applications. Of course, web applications also have other advantages. They're easy to deploy and everything. But a lot of desktop applications, they can update themselves now. So I think there has been like a strong focus on like commercialization. And I think going forward, I think we might see a little bit of a trend pushing back against that. I think that's also what you see sometimes in the crypto world. Of course, many of these crypto projects have also have a financial or revenue model built into them, but some of them are also just about being able to communicate, and nobody owns the network, right? I don't own the network, you don't own it. We all contribute a little bit with our compute resources. I think that is maybe one thing that we are seeing. And in such a system, I think it is harder for any one party to like overly commercialize the whole application experience. But at the moment, of course, some people make a lot of money in that space too. But I think that might be a trend that we're seeing a little bit going in that direction. And then I think another thing that we have seen historically is that there's a tendency for these devices here to like really suck up a lot of our time and like attention. So that instead of technology enabling us to be more social together, the technology gets in between us. So we are looking at these screens all the time, and everything that we do is, all the interaction we have is through the screens and through the computer systems. And I think it would be nice if technology became changed so that we have more technology in our lives, but that we see it less, right? So it becomes less visible, that you don't have to always bring your phone with you everywhere because you need to pay with it, or you need it for train tickets, or you need it for like services or whatever, right? That in a way maybe the technology could solve a lot of our problems, but in a way where we don't need to. It doesn't have to take our attention. And maybe AI can help us get there, but we will see. Maybe AI will be terrible, but it could also be fantastic.
And what helped you to be adaptive to the change, the constant change that is happening in technology?
Oh yeah, I think the only real thing that there is to do is that you have to spend a lot of time keeping up with it, right? So I am trying to keep up with what's going on, for instance, sometimes on social media. And I think the best way that I have found to do that is to try to get close to the people who make the technology and follow those, because that's usually where you see the new stuff coming out. They start talking about it before it becomes, already when it's just an idea, and then you hear about it later and later when it also becomes the first implementation, and then when it's finally released out into the product. So I think that is probably the easiest way that I found, is find the people who create all the changes and follow them. And sometimes when you don't know who that is, then I try to read various websites that are talking about various new developments in tech, because obviously sometimes you don't know about a technology. If you don't know about a technology, you don't know who to follow for that technology, right? So sometimes you also need to go to a website that is just writing about something you have no clue about, or you go to I mean, a lot of that information you can also find when you go on YouTube, right, or similar places. But I think I think it is important to spend some time on it and realize that this takes some time. It's part of our jobs is to keep up with the developments. And if we don't do it, you can probably stay in your job for about 5 years or so without keeping too much up with what is going on. But for instance, if you work with Java, then in 5 years, you get 10 new Java releases. So then you probably need to start looking into some of the new releases, what's new in them, right? So I think that's one way. And I think if you have a good, like a social, professional circle as well, that, that you keep up with something and your friends or your colleagues keep up with something else and you share information about it. And then I think that can help a lot as well, because then you don't need to read every single article out there or watch every single video, because some of your colleagues have watched some of them for you. And then maybe they take the time to understand how it works and whether it works for your company or not. And then you maybe don't need to spend time on it because you say, okay, this is for something else. I'm not doing that. So I think like having a good professional network can also help keeping up with that stuff. And also I think some of the stuff that I spent a lot of time on is getting to the first hello world example with a new technology. Like, how do I make one small functional example that I can then expand a little bit and try this and try that? And sometimes your colleagues can also help you do that very fast, where you have to follow like a long recipe. They can just sit down next to you and say, oh no, you just start here, install this. Okay, now you just change this configuration. Now install that. Now create this project. Now create this file. And then maybe in half an hour, you're up and running. Where if you had to do it yourself and you have to double check everything, did I do this right? And you run into problems, it takes you maybe 2-3 hours, right? But then when you run into the first problem, then your friend or colleague can just say, oh yeah, I also had that problem. It's this problem. And then you fix it in like 1 minute instead of you having to Google a lot or on the internet. So it would be nice if there were some kind of coding clubs or like something like that, where you can like go once in a while, hang out with people, just hear what's new and like get some help with some new technology. But I don't know if we have that. We have a lot of, I think, competitive programming clubs, but I don't know if we have just like creative coding clubs.
And what do you say about Elon Musk everything app idea?
I think the challenge with these everything apps is often that there are some sets of features that complement each other very well. So that when you're already, for instance, like if you have already the phone number of a friend in your phone, then maybe a payment application can be used to connect you to your friend, and then on the back end connect your bank account so you can send money. We do that a lot in Denmark, right? Like, so when we go out for dinner, one person pays and the others just then pay over the phone for whatever they had for dinner that day. So I think in that case, some of these functionalities complement each other very well, but sometimes such huge platforms also end up becoming messy, and sometimes it's hard for such platforms to keep up, to stay competitive, but also at the forefront of everything that goes on within each of these little functionality areas. And sometimes more special purpose apps can function better for that, because you have a whole team only doing that particular functionality. So I think the idea is nice, but will it be successful? That's hard to say, right? But it's interesting to follow, at least in that way, to see what will come out of it, because there will usually come something out of such projects that is in one way or another interesting or useful or beneficial, right? And if not, then we all get to complain to Elon Musk and tell him, we told you it would never work. Right. Yeah.
So AWS Vice President is my subscriber. So do you want to say anything to him?
Oh, I hope I have treated AWS with the respect that it deserves. What can I say? Well, it's a great platform. It's very big. If I were to make anything different on AWS, I would probably start consolidating a lot of the functionality, so there are not so many different ways of doing the same thing. Streamlining all the services in a way. I think that is probably the only thing. Maybe sometimes you need to work a little bit on the documentation. It can sometimes be hard to. The documentation is usually pretty good when you already have a certain level of understanding of AWS. But when you're completely new to a new service, sometimes the documentation can be a little bit confusing. So maybe find someone who is used to writing documentation, hand that job off to them. Other than that, I am not really sure if there's anything else that I would like to say. Keep up the good work. Keep pushing the prices down. That's amazing what we can get on AWS already now at the prices that you have made possible. But of course, we always want it cheaper, right? Ungrateful consumers of their services, we always want it better and cheaper. That's just the way we are. And so, yeah, other than that, I don't know if there's anything else I should be saying.
So I'm sure he'll know this. And I interviewed him already. In few days, I'll interview him again. Yeah, you can see on my channel.
Perfect. Actually, I want to go back and see that interview.
Yeah.
How long time have you been doing this?
Maybe 3 years.
3 years?
Yeah, 3 years.
Huh? That's very interesting. It's very cool. I had not seen your YouTube channel before you pinged me, but I see that you have a lot of followers on Twitter.
Yeah.
Right?
Everywhere.
Yeah, and so
Instagram, Facebook. I have 40,000 plus followers.
I'm not even using Instagram. Maybe I should. And I'm not using Facebook either, right? I'm only using Twitter and LinkedIn and YouTube and a couple of other smaller platforms, right? Just to have an extra backup of my videos. But
so you have not seen my videos.
When you wrote me on Twitter, I said, let me have a look at your videos, at your channel, and then so I watched the interview you did with a woman from Ecuador about, I think she was studying. It was something with entrepreneurship. I cannot remember exactly what she was studying. But it was business related, anyways, right? Oh, it was very interesting, and that. So I mean, I did that to see, to get a feeling for what kind of channel you were running, and if it would be good for me to go on. Sometimes you can risk going on a channel that is maybe not so good, right? If you don't know anything. So I did a little bit of checking, but it looked all fine. And then I was unfortunately just busy at the time when you wrote me the last time. So, but well, we got it done today, right? That's perfect. But I'll definitely keep an eye on your channel and on your Twitter account. Unfortunately, I cannot keep an eye on your Instagram and your Facebook accounts because I'm not in there. But that's cool. 40,000 followers. Where's that? Was that on Facebook or was that on Instagram?
On Twitter, I have 26,000 and 10,000, and on Instagram 8,000 and Facebook 1,000. Like total combinedly, I have 40,000 plus.
Oh yeah, so you are a big influencer. That's cool.
Yeah,
that's
I'm
very
doing
cool.
I did masters in software engineering, also bachelor's in computer science and engineering. Right now, I'm getting right now. I'm doing some DevOps projects, AWS Cloud DevOps
Ah,
engineering
cool.
projects. Right now, I'm involved in that. Some UK related projects, also projects related to my country. So I'm involving
Yeah.
in that, and I interview people from everywhere, from all over
And
the
you say
world.
and you say what country are you from?
India, South India, and
You're from India?
Hyderabad city. Yeah.
Ah, Hyderabad, yeah. And we work, of course, we work a lot with Indians in our industry, right? Uh, they're both locally, of course, in our country, but also online, and so. Yeah.
And I interviewed more than 100 country plus people who are into different parts of the world and who are into different professions and who are into different levels in technology, starting from software engineer, developer, architects. You will find a lot of architects in my channel from Microsoft, Google,
Ah,
Netflix,
cool.
uh, AWS. I interviewed a lot of AWS experts, uh, and including the vice president. Also, a lot of podcasters who talk about AWS and the services of AWS, and also who are working with AWS. Also, people who are working with Azure Cloud, who are working in Microsoft, all over the world. Uh, and also not only technology people, in order to understand, I'm just curious in nature as a human being. I'm a curious person. Being a technology, studying technology, I am just curious. Like I want to know different people, what they are doing, how they are solving problems. I interviewed police officers, authors, doctors, filmmakers, producers, um, people. Like few days before, I interviewed a person uh, who got reply from Elon Musk. Actually, Elon Musk retweeted this guy's tweet. He wrote about his experience with Tesla. You know, his experience, how he
Yeah.
was feeling when he drive Tesla car, and that reached Elon Musk, and he tweeted that. And then
So
I,
was
of
there a
course,
reference to you?
yeah,
Was
no,
there a
no,
reference to your show there?
no. Actually,
No.
he actually tagged Elon Musk saying that this is what I'm feeling driving the Tesla. So he wrote a big article about that, and Elon Musk retweeted that and saying, "Thanks, David." You can find in his timeline. Thanks, David. So once I saw that tweet, I contacted David and I said, "Will you be
Ah,
on my show? I'll interview you."
perfect. Perfect. Very well done, actually. I think, by the way, I have been thinking about also doing some like interview style talks, just or like actually maybe I like it better when I like it best when it's like a conversation. So, like for instance, during this talk we had now, there were many times where I wanted to actually ask you about the same things that you're asking me, but then I'm like, okay, fine, we agreed at first that this is. I saw from some of your other video, like from the other video, okay, you're doing interviews, so I I will maybe get a chance to ask you a lot of the same questions later on. For instance, one of the things that I'm very interested in hearing about is what is going on in India, because from what I see, India is just about to become like a huge tech hub, if it's not already a tech
Yeah,
hub. I think it's going to be like Silicon Valley times 20
correct.
or like 1,000 or whatever, right? This is going to explode, I think. And I would like to hear from people, from developers and tech people in India, if they see that, if they also feel the same enthusiasm and all that stuff, how that is going, right? And I think this is probably something to talk about and to revisit. But I mean, if you want to, you can tell me. Do you also think that this is going to happen? Because from where I'm seeing it, this seems like this is now about to take off.
Yeah. My the city I live in is called as Hyderabad, which is in South India. You can find Hyderabad data center also in AWS regions, the availability zones. You can see Hyderabad city, which is already there, and this is going to be a next New York.
Yeah, I believe you. It's amazing what is going on over there. Yeah.
So
It
what
must
is,
also be,
yeah,
it must also be for you to see your country change, or like your and especially also your industry change so much in so short time.
yeah,
It's probably also like a big change for you, right?
yeah. Definitely, there are
I
a
mean,
lot of change that is happening in last few years when you saw this cloud, the countries have been interconnected with each other because of this technology. The vast information, the wide information, we can able to access information from anywhere on this planet. So we Indians are very smart and very curious in knowing about what is happening in other parts of other parts of the world, and trying to solve problems of other countries also. So since we have the huge population, uh, highly populated country in the world.
and also a very you have a lot of highly educated people,
Yes, yeah,
right? So that also really helps a lot. Uh,
yeah.
so
So
yeah.
what is your observation as a technologist, as a person who is into technology for 20 plus years? You saw different people in your life, you saw different technologies, you have interacted with so many different customers, and you know how things are, how the communication system is working. And me creating this network, I actually want to share something which will definitely make you think that once I completed my master's in software engineering, I decided to do PhD. I wanted to do
PhD.
PhD, the
No,
doctorate.
no, sorry. Yeah, PhD, like a
Yeah,
like a degree, right? Yeah.
yeah, degree, the doctorate one. So I was preparing for the entrance exam, and I collected all the subjects which are there in my master's and in my bachelor's, combining 56 subjects, all the subjects, programming languages, computer networks, all these subjects. So I decided to write, along with this preparation, I wanted to write each and every subject in my website when I'm preparing. So one subject which drawn my attention is computer networks, in which computers are connected with each other, information transfer is happening, and we are using different mediums and different securities, permissions, gateways. All these made me think. Like I thought this is the idea of a human being. This computer network system has been created by the idea of a human being. By understanding human networks, the 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 communication system that is happening in human beings, he wanted to interconnect with people, and he wants some software or some medium with which they can connect with each other. So with that idea, I thought like I want to create a YouTube channel or a podcast where I'll go back and try to create a human network and connect with all the country people in the world, and try to introduce them through my channel and what they are doing, how they are solving problems, and communicating with them. And I created a unique concept. I never saw any person doing communicating with everywhere in the world. I personally don't know, maybe, but in the 3 years of span, apart from my full time job, I'm interviewing experts like you. More than 500 plus interviews I have done daily, 2 interviews.
500.
Yeah, 500.
You have been very active, very productive, very well done, I must say.
And also some couple of experts from NASA. You can find in my YouTube channel, the
How do you
AWS Vice
find all these people? How do you find
Twitter,
them? You just find them
Twitter,
online?
Twitter.
I
So,
find that to be very cool. Yeah, I think you're very well done, I must say.
I want your observation, your feedback about my work. Uh, Me talking with different experts and different uh, technology level people in different industries, in different companies, and from different parts of the world. How this experience uh, is going to helpful for me in coming days in technology.
I mean, for you as a person, or for
Yeah,
everyone involved? Oh,
for me.
definitely what has been helpful for me when connecting with people from all over the world is that is multiple. Like there are multiple things, right? First of all, whenever you have like a question of a somewhat more technical or like more specific level, you have a backdoor sometimes into some organizations, and you can ask them about something which you cannot find the answer for online. And maybe they can also tell you there is no answer or this is not possible or whatever, but you have sometimes access to people who can answer questions that are otherwise very hard to find answers for. Of course, we have to be careful not to ask like 1,000 questions a day, because people have jobs and families and you know that they have to attend as well. But this has been very helpful for me whenever I'm thinking like, I wonder if this is possible, or if you want to know in a technology what the next features that are coming will be. Sometimes you can find the people and ask them, will this and this happen? And then they can say yes or no, or maybe in like 3 versions or whatever, right? I'd say, oh, we had not planned that, but that's a good idea. Maybe we will add it, right? So I think from that way, this network can be very beneficial to you. But I also think there will be a lot of benefits that you cannot predict, but that will just kind of happen. Like for instance, so whatever, and then they retweet it and a lot of more people see it, or meaning that sometimes you get connected through these people to some people that you don't know yet, but that could be very useful for you to know, right? So as your network expands, your surface, the surface of the network also expands. So like the people that are just on the outside of your network, that circle also expands, and so you get access to a lot more people that way. So yeah, that will definitely be beneficial for you, but it will also be beneficial for them, because sometimes you might be sharing some information that is useful for them, or you might be able to help them, because it also goes the other way, right? Sometimes they will be contacting you and say, hey, I know that Sai knows exactly how this works or whatever, right? I'm going to ask him. Actually, I'm going to make a little note here saying you work with AWS and DevOps. I might have some questions for you.
Yeah, definitely. You can.
Yeah. So, but I mean, this is good. And then also just like, I'm also sometimes trying to keep the people I know in the back of my head. Like as I'm like, oh, they are working with this, and now I see these people are working with that, and then I try to connect them, right? And say,
Yeah.
I know these. For instance, I know I have some very good friends that work with quantum computing, and then I'm also connected a little bit with in Manchester doing some Tornado VM, and they are developing a quantum computing simulation platform. And I'm like, the other guys that I know, my friends, they are in Liverpool, and Manchester is like very close to Liverpool. I'm like, maybe they should talk, right? Or at least maybe one should see what the other is doing. So in that way, this is also beneficial, not just for you, but for the people that you are connecting. And the network effect becomes, of course, greater and greater the larger the network becomes.
Actually, I got work opportunity from UK. They have hired me remotely by seeing my YouTube channel, and I seeing my DevOps work. Right now, I'm working for UK company from India.
Yeah.
So that's the thing that is related
Amazing.
to what you said just now.
Yeah, and sometimes you cannot. I think is probably the most important learning from me about human networks is that you cannot predict the benefits that you're getting. You cannot know ahead of time, because if you are trying to calculate, is it good for me to connect with that person? Should I spend time helping that person? And then it becomes like, what do I get out of it all the time, right? If you do that, then quite often you will be thinking, there's probably no benefit in connecting with this person. I just won't spend the time or the effort, right? And then your network remains small. But when you just open up and connect, sometimes things happen that you could never have predicted, right? Like you get connected to this person, to that person, to that person, and then they have a problem, and then you get a job, or maybe you just go there and visit them, and you have you create you start a new good friendship or something like that, right? Some of this just, you cannot predict it, and you shouldn't try to. I think, at least, I don't want to tell you how you should run it, like you are doing very well already, but for me, I try not to plan it too much or predict or like put too many purposes into it. I just try to connect, and then I talk to people and see where it's going. And it sounds like you're doing a lot of the same thing. And then I trying to premeditate it or trying to plan it, right?
Definitely. Once you see my YouTube channel, definitely you'll feel very happy for
Exactly.
watching. Yeah, because I heard a lot of experts from a lot of top level positions saying me that I'm adding so much value to the technology industry with my work.
Yeah. And also sometimes it can, and also it can be sometimes that one person in your network discovers someone else, right? Because they see them on your channel and like, oh, I didn't know this person existed, but now I know, and I'm going to connect to that person because I have that problem and they have the solution, right? And so you are helping, like the work that you are doing with the interviews is also helping make a lot of people visible that might not in their normal job be so visible, because maybe they work, now I say it called back office, or they work in a laboratory or something else where their work is not that much seen by the outside world. But when you make that interview with them, you make them visible. And it means that other people who need what they can do, all of a sudden realize, oh, there's a person there. Or maybe they realize, oh, someone is solving that problem. I didn't even know there was someone doing this. This is. So I think, exactly what you're doing is very much like you're bringing the unseen into the light so that we all can see what is going on behind the scenes, right?
Yeah, you will see so many unseen people in coming days in my channel.
That's
for
perfect.
sure.
That's perfect. I will keep an eye on it.
Every person will shock you, like, who is this person? Who is this person? Who is this person? Like, definitely.
That's cool. That's cool. Because there are a lot of smart and very skilled people out there who probably deserve a lot more attention than what they are getting in their job, right? So, because sometimes everything at work can sometimes become about meeting the deadlines and staying within budget and everything. So we forget sometimes to give each other credit for what we are doing. So I think that's what you help doing, right? Like lifting people up and showing them to the rest of the world so they can get the credit they deserve.
So can you share your web links with my audience?
I can. How do I do it? Do I just say it?
I'll share on the screen, and also I'll share in the description of this video. I'll put on my website. This conversation I'll put on my website. People who finds my website can able to see your work and your contribution, whatever, and your social media presence, everything they can learn from you.
So my website is jenkov.com, jenkov.com. And that's usually where I write or share a lot of the articles that I write. And from there, you can also find links to my Twitter account and my LinkedIn account and my YouTube channel. And I think that's about it. Anyways, if there are more links, then you can find them in there. Yeah, I have some GitHub repositories as well with some notes in and some like examples, right? So
I'll share your GitHub link as well. People who finds it definitely can learn from you.
Perfect. Thank you very much.
And can I put this video on my YouTube channel with your permission?
Of course. Of course you can.
And also, can And also, can I put this audio and video clip on my podcast, website, internet, social media, everywhere with your permission?
Yes. Yes, you have my permission to do that. Yeah.
So I believe that a lot of people learn from what you said, from the questions that I have asked you. I can't say that this is completely you in this limited time that I have. I try to ask very few questions. I know you are an ocean because you have spent a lot of time in technology. I cannot put that 20 plus years of experience in 1.5 hour video, but I tried to say something about you to my audience with your contribution through your presence on internet.
Yeah. Perfect. Thank you. I hope that it will be beneficial to some people, or interesting, or something that and that they can stay awake or through my my ramblings. But I thank you very much for doing this. It was actually it was a very good, very interesting conversation, for especially in the last part when I start getting to ask you questions. That was really nice. I mean, of course, the first stuff I knew already because you were asking me questions, right? But then when I get to ask you some questions, it's always nice to hear what other people are thinking and how they see the world and all that stuff. Yeah.
Definitely, if you have DevOps guy requirement, I'm open to work with experts like you who are very experienced, because I can learn something from you.
Oh, perfect. I will keep that in mind. I'm unfortunately not always the one doing the hiring for the projects that I'm on. But you never know. You never know. This is again like when we go back to the personal networks. You never know. You never know. Actually, there's one funny story here at the end. I think it was 2010. I was working as a freelancer and I wanted to do some software on the side, but I didn't have the time. So I decided to hire an Indian freelancer to work for me. And so he was working in his own job at the time, in a job. And so he wanted to try to work as a freelancer. So I hired him as a freelancer. He quit his own job and he worked for me for 6 months. And after that, he continued to work as a freelancer. And today, he owns an outsourcing company with, I think, at least 50 employees or something like that, 30, 50 employees or so. And I just saw on LinkedIn that they got new offices and everything. Amazing, right? Like how he, and then this is what I mean again with the networks, right? So it was a small thing for me to help him get started, but once he got started, right, he just ran with it and like created a big success out of that. And it's fun to have, how these human networks, like we touch each other a little bit, but these small touches can be like come something very big, in the other end sometimes. I mean, it's not my, it's not because of anything that I did for him. He's just very skilled, right? But I just helped him get started. And once he was started, then he had everything he needed to just run off with it. And I think that was amazing. That's a fun story. I talked to him recently about also coming over and visiting one day. I should probably do that. Yeah.
So definitely, if there is a requirement, I'm going to be the second person as well.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
Thank you again for your valuable time, Jakob. Thank you for sharing your valuable experience with my audience, and thank you for allowing me to ask you a few questions, which will definitely, the answers that you said from your experience, not everybody's experiences are same. Definitely that will help people who don't know how you did it, how you are made things happen. Definitely, if changes one person in the world, you will be the contributor, and I'll be the reason for this contribution.
Thank you very much for that. Yeah.
Thank you, sir. Again, take care.
Yeah, take care, and I'll talk to you again, I hope. one day.
Yeah, sure. Anytime.
Perfect.
Bye.